If someone made you feel unworthy, remember this. Have you ever felt like you weren't enough? Like no matter how hard you tried, you were constantly falling short of someone else's expectations? Chloe knew exactly what it was like. She had spent years building a life, only for someone to come along and tear it down with harsh words and empty criticisms. But in the darkest moments of her pain, Chloe learned something powerful. Your worth is not defined by anyone else but you. Chloe had always been the confident one, the woman who could walk into any room and own it. She knew her worth, and she wasn't afraid to show it. But that was before Jonathan. At first, Jonathan seemed perfect. He was charming and charismatic, and he made her feel seen in ways no one else had. But as time passed, the cracks started to show. His compliments became rare, replaced by critiques. Small, subtle jabs at her appearance, her career, the way she dressed, or the way she spoke. At first, Chloe brushed it off. "He's just being honest," she told herself. "He's only trying to help me improve." But with each passing day, the words stung more. What once felt like constructive criticism began to chip away at her confidence. Slowly but surely, Chloe started to believe him. She found herself doubting her decisions, questioning her value. Every compliment she received, no matter how genuine, felt hollow. Her friends' praise seemed empty because she had started believing that she was never going to be good enough for Jonathan. One night, after a particularly harsh encounter, Chloe couldn't take it anymore. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tears streaming down her face. The person staring back at her wasn't the strong, vibrant woman she once knew. She looked tired, broken small. She hadn't recognized herself in weeks. As the tears fell, something in her shifted. It wasn't a magical moment, but it was something more profound, a deep, quiet truth. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Your worth is never tied to someone else's opinion. You are enough, just as you are. Chloe took a deep breath, wiped her tears away, and looked herself in the eye. The woman staring back at her wasn't broken. She was strong. She was beautiful. She was enough. The next morning, Chloe woke up and immediately set to work. She started reclaiming the pieces of herself Jonathan had tried to steal. She put on her favorite dress, a deep emerald green, one that always made her feel powerful. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't just see someone who was trying to look good for others. She saw herself, truly for the first time in a long time. Chloe decided it was time to let go of the toxic words and embrace the woman she was becoming. She threw out the messages, the comments, the reminders of the self-doubt Jonathan had planted in her. She unfollowed social media accounts that made her feel inadequate and started filling her mind with positive affirmations. But the road to self-love wasn't easy. At work, Chloe felt the familiar, old feelings of inadequacy creeping back in. Jonathan's voice still lingered in her mind. You'll never be good enough. But she quickly shut it down. No more. She was enough. Chloe was enough, just as she was. She reminded herself, every moment of every day, that she did not need Jonathan or anyone else to define her. However, just when Chloe thought she was starting to find her balance, a text from Jonathan popped up on her phone. It was short, but the message cut through her like a knife. I miss you, Chloe. I think we need to talk. Her heart skipped a beat. The voice in her head told her to ignore him, to not fall back into the trap. But a part of her, the old part, still wanted to hear him out, still wanted the closure. But was it really closure she needed, or was it something else? Something deeper that she hadn't addressed yet? As she stared at the message, Chloe's hand trembled. She had come so far, but she knew that facing Jonathan again could undo everything she had worked for. Would she fall back into the patterns of self-doubt? Or would she finally choose herself? Chloe sat frozen, staring at the text message. Her thumb hovered over the screen, the temptation to reply tugging at her. But she had made so much progress. She had spent months rebuilding her sense of self-worth, slowly untangling the knots of insecurity Jonathan had tied around her. Could she really face him again? Was she strong enough to stand firm in everything she had learned? Her fingers trembled as she set the phone down. No, this time, she wouldn't let him dictate her life. She had spent too many years bending herself to fit into his world. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, what if he's changed? What if this time he truly wants to make things right? Chloe shook her head. No more. She couldn't keep looking for validation from someone who had never given it freely. She was enough on her own, and she wouldn't let the ghosts of her past dictate her future. The next day, Chloe went about her routine with a determined smile. She spent her lunch break at the park, reading a book she'd picked up on personal growth, a subject she had never truly explored before but now felt drawn to. She noticed things she hadn't before, like the way the sunlight filtered through the trees or how the sound of birds in the air made her feel calm and centered. As she sat on the bench, enjoying her peaceful solitude, her phone buzzed again. Chloe's heart skipped a beat. It was Jonathan. This time, it wasn't just a message, it was a call. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Should I answer? Part of her wanted to know why he was reaching out, but the other part, the one that had grown stronger over the past months, wanted to walk away and leave the past where it belonged. Taking a deep breath, she answered the call, keeping her voice steady. Hello! The familiar sound of Jonathan's voice immediately swept over her, his tone softer than it had ever been. Chloe, I know I messed up. I've been thinking about everything, about how I treated you, and I'm sorry. I've realized how wrong I was, and I want to make things right. Chloe's heart fluttered an old, familiar feeling began to resurface. She had wanted this for so long, the apology, the closure. But now that it was here, something felt different. She wasn't the same person she had been when they first broke up. She had changed. I appreciate your apology, Jonathan, Chloe said, her voice steady. But I've spent a long time working on myself, and I'm not the same woman I was when we were together. I've learned to love myself, and I can't keep letting you back into my life. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a sigh. Chloe, I understand. I know it's been a long road, but please, don't you think we can start over? We can fix everything if we try. Chloe closed her eyes, holding her breath. Could she go back? She had built a life for herself, a life that no longer revolved around the emotional roller coaster of their toxic relationship. Could she risk everything again? Was there still a part of her that craved the love they once shared? Before Chloe could respond, Jonathan's voice interrupted her thoughts. Chloe, please. I need to see you. Just once. If not for us, then for closure. For us both. Her heart raced again. She knew what she had to do. She had to be strong and walk away. There was no room for someone who had made her feel unworthy. But deep inside, the temptation still lingered. What if he really had changed? What if this was the closure she needed? Chloe stood up from the bench, taking a deep breath. I think we've said enough, Jonathan. I've moved on, and I hope you can find peace too. Goodbye. She ended the call, her hands shaking slightly, but she felt a surge of strength. She had just made the hardest decision of her life. But as she walked away, feeling lighter than she had in years, her phone buzzed again. It was another text from Jonathan, but this time, the words were different. The message read, You think you've won, but you don't know what's coming next. As Chloe's heart began to race again, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift. The text message made her question everything. Had she really escaped the past? Or was something darker waiting for her, something that Jonathan had left behind? With a sense of dread creeping up her spine, Chloe looked around. Had Jonathan truly changed, or was he hiding something much darker? The answers were coming, but were they the ones she wanted to hear? Chloe couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She walked down the familiar streets of her neighborhood, her mind racing with thoughts of Jonathan's cryptic message. What did he mean by, you don't know what's coming next? Was it a threat? Or was it simply the last remnants of his manipulation trying to get a rise out of her? She couldn't be sure. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let him back into her life, no matter what he said. She had moved on. She had worked too hard to reclaim herself and her peace to allow him to disrupt that. As she reached her apartment, Chloe locked the door behind her and collapsed onto the couch, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The phone buzzed again. Another text from Jonathan. You think it's over, Chloe? You're wrong. I never let go, and neither will you. Her stomach twisted in knots as she stared at the message. She had told herself that walking away was the right choice, but now she questioned if she had truly done enough. What was Jonathan capable of? She hadn't heard from him in weeks before today, and now he was back with these ominous messages. As much as she wanted to ignore it, Chloe knew she couldn't just sit idly by. Jonathan wasn't the type of person to accept rejection easily. and she feared that his message wasn't just an empty threat. It felt like the beginning of something much darker, something that could pull her back into the chaos she had worked so hard to escape. That night, Chloe couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow in her room made her anxious. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, just her nerves. After all, she had just stood up to Jonathan. She was strong now, right? But every time she closed her eyes, she couldn't shake the image of him the way he had looked when she last saw him. Desperate, broken, and beneath it all, there was still something dark. Something she hadn't fully understood. The following day, Chloe decided to take control. She would visit her old therapist, the one who had helped her through so much of her healing journey. It was time to reaffirm her strength and keep moving forward, no matter what. She couldn't let Jonathan, or anyone, bring her back to that place of fear and self-doubt. But as she entered her therapist's office, Chloe was greeted by an unexpected sight. The walls were covered in new, unfamiliar images, pictures of Jonathan, their relationship, and her journey together. There were even notes about Chloe's childhood, things she hadn't shared with anyone except her closest friends. "What is this?" Chloe's voice was shaky as she stared at the photos. Her therapist's eyes were wide, but she quickly composed herself. "Chloe, I didn't put these here. Someone else must have." Before she could finish, the phone on the table rang. The therapist hesitated for a moment, but then picked it up. Her expression changed immediately as she listened. "Chloe, you need to leave. Now," her therapist said, her voice trembling. "There's something we need to talk about, but not here." Chloe's heart raced as she stood up, her mind spinning. The therapist's face had gone pale, and the look in her eyes was enough to send a cold chill down Chloe's spine. What was happening? Had Jonathan somehow found a way to get to her through people she trusted? Was he capable of controlling her life like this again? As they hurried out of the office, Chloe looked back toward the door, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a wave of genuine fear. The darkness that had haunted her was closing in again. Would Chloe be able to stay strong against Jonathan's pull, or was he closer than she realized? And who could she trust when even her past was being twisted against her? Chloe's mind raced as she stepped out of the therapist's office, her hands trembling. The words, "You need to leave," echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. She could hear her heartbeat thumping loudly in her chest, drowning out everything else. As she hurried down the hallway with the therapist, the cold chill that had settled around her felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating her. What had just happened? Why were there pictures of her, Jonathan, and her life, things that no one but she and Jonathan should have known about? "Chloe, please," her therapist said urgently, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the back exit of the building. "We don't have much time." They stepped into the alley, the sounds of the busy city streets muffled by the thick fog that had rolled in, swallowing them whole. Chloe glanced around nervously, the feeling of being watched settling on her like a cloak. "Who did this?" Chloe demanded, her voice shaky but sharp. "Why were those pictures in your office? Why did you act like you knew about Jonathan?" Her therapist's face was pale, her hands shaking as she gripped Chloe's shoulders. "Chloe, I don't know. I didn't put those pictures there. And when I heard the phone call this morning, I realized someone had been watching you, someone very close to you. Someone who knows everything about you." Chloe's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean? Who?" The therapist hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice trembling. "It's Jonathan, Chloe. He has access to people you trust. He's always been able to manipulate situations to get what he wants. He's more dangerous than you realize. And now, he's coming for you." Chloe's heart sank. "No, that's not possible. He's not like that anymore. I've moved on. He doesn't control me. He can't." The therapist's eyes softened with pity. "Chloe, he's never stopped controlling you. He's been feeding on your fear, on your emotional attachment to him. You need to trust me. He's never let go. He's dangerous." Suddenly, Chloe froze. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she felt a presence behind her. She turned quickly, her eyes scanning the alley for any sign of danger. But there was no one, just the echo of her breaths in the thick fog. The following days passed in a blur for Chloe. Her apartment felt different. Every creak of the floorboards and every breeze through the window made her jump. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow darker. The walls that once felt comforting now felt watchful, like they were closing in on her. She tried to ignore the feelings, focusing on her work and continuing to strengthen her boundaries. But the unsettling thoughts about Jonathan wouldn't leave her. She kept receiving strange, anonymous texts, cryptic messages that seemed to track her every move. "You thought you could run away. You'll never escape me, Chloe." She started to feel like there was no escape. Jonathan's influence, his manipulation, had always been subtle, creeping into every part of her life. It was like he had planted himself so deeply within her mind that even when he wasn't around, she could feel his presence. One evening, as Chloe returned to her apartment after another long day, she noticed something different. The door to her apartment was ajar just slightly. Her heart skipped a beat as she stepped inside cautiously, her breath caught in her throat. It was quiet, too quiet. She looked around the room, everything in its place. But then, her eyes landed on the coffee table. A single, familiar red rose sat there, its petals slightly wilted. Jonathan's signature gesture. He had given her roses countless times during their relationship, always showing up unannounced, catching her off guard. A chill ran down her spine. The rose. It was a message. He was watching her. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Jonathan. "You thought you were free, but you're mine, Chloe. You'll always be mine. I'm not done with you." Her pulse quickened. She tried to steady her breath as she sat on the couch, her hands trembling. What had she gotten herself into? Chloe's heart raced as she stared at the text, the words sinking in. She had thought she was free, but Jonathan was right there, in her mind, in her life again. He wasn't finished with her. And the more she fought, the more he pulled her back into the nightmare. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the sound of scraping metal echoed from the hallway. Chloe stood, her legs weak beneath her, her mind racing. Was it him? Was he really here, in her apartment, watching her from the shadows? Before she could move, her phone buzzed again, this time a picture. She opened it to find a dark figure standing outside her window, his face obscured by the night, but the shape was unmistakable. It was Jonathan. "You'll be mine again, Chloe. This time you won't escape." Her breath hitched as the realization sank in. Jonathan's grip wasn't just emotional anymore. He was closing in on her physically. What would she do? How could she protect herself when it felt like he was everywhere, even when he wasn't? Physically there, Chloe's heart raced as she stared at the picture on her phone. Jonathan, standing outside her window, his figure barely visible in the darkness. The cold chill that had been creeping up her spine intensified. She tried to steady her breath, but the weight of what was happening pressed down on her chest. She was trapped. Again. Jonathan was here, and she was more vulnerable than ever. The apartment felt like it was closing in on her, the walls pressing in with a suffocating weight. Chloe's eyes darted around the room, her pulse hammering in her ears. Where was he? Was he hiding in the shadows, watching her every move? Or was he standing just outside the window, waiting for her to make a mistake? She stood frozen for a moment, her legs shaking, her mind racing. Was this it? Was this where he finally succeeded in getting his grip back on her? Suddenly, the phone buzzed again. "I see you, Chloe. I've been watching you. This time you won't escape." Her breath hitched. She could feel her heart slamming against her ribs, her hands trembling as she clutched the phone. No, this was not going to happen again. Not this time. Chloe forced herself to move, shaking off the fear that was paralyzing her. She couldn't go back to that place, to the version of herself who had been controlled by his toxic words and manipulations. She had to fight back. She quickly got up, her eyes scanning the apartment for any sign of him. Her first instinct was to run, to grab her things and go somewhere safe, to call the police, to escape. But a voice inside her, the same one that had been whispering that she was strong enough to leave him, told her no. This time, she would face him, head on. Chloe marched toward the window, her fingers shaking but her resolve hardening. She peered out into the dark night. There, standing in the shadows of the alley, was Jonathan's silhouette. His face was obscured, but the shape, the posture, the way he stood, it was unmistakable. Her stomach churned as she realized he wasn't just a memory anymore. He was real, and he was here, watching her every move. The next few seconds felt like an eternity as Chloe gathered all her courage and swung open the window. She leaned out, her voice strong, though it trembled beneath the surface. "Jonathan, I don't want you here." His face twisted into a twisted smirk as he stepped forward, coming into view. His eyes dark, hollow met hers, and the smile that curled on his lips was the last thing she ever wanted to see. "You'll never be free of me, Chloe," he said, his voice low and chilling. "I'm part of you now. You can't escape me. You're mine. Forever." A shiver ran down Chloe's spine, but she held her ground. She had to be strong. "No, I'm not yours." She stepped back from the window, eyes burning with determination. "I've moved on. I'm free, Jonathan. I'm not who I was when we were together. I've learned that I don't need you to be whole." For a split second, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even a hint of something like regret. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the same coldness that had controlled her for so long. "You really think you can move on from me, Chloe?" he sneered. "You'll always be mine. Always." The sound of crashing glass interrupted their confrontation. Chloe turned sharply, her heart racing. The window behind her had shattered into 1,000 pieces, and as she turned to run, she was stopped by a cold, skeletal hand gripping her wrist. The room seemed to tilt as the shadows grew thicker, stretching across the walls like long fingers reaching for her. She tried to pull away, but the grip was unyielding, like iron chains. "You think you can leave?" a voice boomed as the figure of her ancestor stepped from the shadows. His face was twisted in agony, his hollow eyes glaring at her. The same curse that had bound Jonathan to the mansion had now found its way to her. Her heart pounded as she felt the dark energy surge through the room, pressing in on her like a vice. The walls groaned, and the air grew thick with the presence of the spirits. Chloe felt her body go cold, and for a moment, she questioned if she could make it out of this. Would she lose everything? Then, a flash of light pierced the dark, cutting through the overwhelming shadows. The hand gripping her wrist loosened. The pressure in the room lightened, just enough for Chloe to break free. She ran toward the door, her heart racing in her chest. But as she reached the door, she heard the haunting voice of Jonathan, low and deadly. "You'll never leave me." Chloe turned to face the door, but when she opened it, she found herself standing in another realm altogether. The walls were different, the floor cold beneath her feet, and the light, or lack thereof, was chilling. It felt like she was back in the dark world she had tried to escape from, and Jonathan was right behind her, waiting. But this time, the real battle had only just begun. Was it really too late to break free? Or was she destined to be trapped in this nightmare forever? If you found strength in Chloe's journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us on this path of self-empowerment and emotional healing. By subscribing, you'll be the first to receive more inspirational stories and powerful messages. Let's walk through this journey together. Thanks for watching.